What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a big shout out to the brother Aram for once again donating to the channel. A longtime subscriber to Too Raw for TV, aka Too Raw for Sports. Big time NBA historian, a fan of the golden era of the NBA. In many people's eyes, the golden era, or the golden years, the 1960s into the 1990s. Although I think the NBA, I think the best years, basketball improved phenomenally starting in the mid to late 50s, as opposed to the quality of basketball when it first started in the 40s. You really look at the game, it really improved after the shot clock was instituted. And I think basketball stayed at a high level as far as play is concerned, all the way until, like, to me, the mid to late 2000s. But it's become more or less a three-point barrage, three-point contest, no defense. Everybody does the same thing. It's boring to me now. But anyway, this video isn't about a critique of today's game. It's about celebrating one of the great players in the history of the NBA, Pistol Pete Maravich. While his NBA career was great, it didn't quite live up to the expectations that people had for Pete Maravich when he was drafted back in 1970. Inconsistent play, lack of playoff success, and injuries prevented Pete from reaching his true potential as a basketball player. But he still had a very impressive career. Over 10 years, Pistol Pete scored 15,948 points, dished out 3,563 assists, and corralled 2,747 rebounds. Those were career averages of 24.2 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 5.4 assists per contest. Over his career, Pete Maravich appeared in 658 games, shot 44.1% from the floor. Some people, will make a lot of noise about Pete's field goal percentage. But one thing that has to be remembered is that Pete took a lot of mid-range, deep, and what would today be three-point shots, and sometimes deep three-point shots, especially for the era that he played in. It wasn't uncommon for him to shoot from 25 to 30 feet out. So that accounts for some of why he shot more around 44, 43, maybe 45%, as opposed to 47, 48%. He was a really good foul shooter, 82% for his career. And, he made 10 of 15 three-point attempts in his career, all coming during his last year, 1979-1980, all coming his last year with the Utah Jazz, that was the first year they were Utah, and the Boston Celtics. As far as his free throw shooting is concerned, too, by the way, from 1977 to 1980, he was an 85.7% free throw shooter, so he got better as he got older. As far as his accolades are concerned, Pete Maravich never won a championship, and I believe he only appeared in 26 career playoff games, which is kind of why I felt compelled to keep Pete out of my top 15, because I thought I would have been hypocritical to penalize Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady for the lack of playoff success, and to a certain extent injuries with Tracy, but not do the same thing with Pete. Uh, I thought about the revolutionary aspects of Pete's career. Maybe that was superseded, but I didn't do that. As far as his resume is concerned, 5-time NBA All-Star, 2-time All-NBA First Team Player, 2-time All-NBA Second Team Player, NBA All-Rookie First Team, won a scoring title back in 1976-77, was on the 50th and 75th anniversary teams. Number 44 is retired by the Atlanta Hawks. His number 7 is retired by the Utah Jazz. And his number 7 is retired by the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, he never played for the Pelicans, but he was such a legend, and is such a legend, in New Orleans, that they felt compelled to retire his number. In college, this is where he made his legend. 2-time National Collegiate Player of the Year, 3-time consensus First Team All-American, 3-time SEC Player of the Year, 3-time NCAA season scoring leader, and he is still the NCAA Division I all-time scoring leader. Although, what was his name? Antonio Davis, I think it is. Excuse me. Antoine Davis. Antoine Davis came very, very close to superseding Pete Maravich as the all-time leading collegiate scorer, but just came 3 points shy. But it has to be held into context. He did play something like 60-something more games than Pete. So that has to be put into its proper perspective. His number 23 is retired by the LSU Tigers, and he was a first-team Parade All-American in 1965. Pete Maravich was born near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1947. Maravich chose to focus, well, actually his father, who was a professional player in his youth, was now a basketball coach, and he wanted his son to be a basketball player and to be a great basketball player. And from a very, very young age, Pete Maravich worked on his game. He was something of a prodigy, to be honest with you, as a basketball player. He amazed his friends and family with his basketball abilities from a young age. Press Maravich instilled in his son the fundamentals, starting when Pete was 7 years old. Obsessively, young Maravich spent hours practicing ball control tricks, passes, head fakes, and long-range shots. Maravich played high school varsity ball at Daniel High School in Central South Carolina a year before being old enough to attend the school. While at Daniel from 1961 to 63, Maravich participated in the school's first ever game against a team from an all-black school. In 1963, his father departed from his position as head basketball coach at Clemson University and joined the coaching staff at North Carolina State University. While in Raleigh, North Carolina, Maravich attended Needham B. Broughton High School, where his famous moniker was born. From his habit of shooting the ball from his side as if holding a revolver, Maravich became known as Pistol Pete Maravich. He graduated from Broadham in 1965 and then attended Edwards Military Institute, where he averaged 33 points per game. Maravich never liked school and did not like Edwards Military Institute. It was known that Press Maravich was extremely protective of his son and would guard against any issue that might come up during his adolescence. Press threatened to shoot Maravich with a .45 caliber pistol if he drank or got into trouble. Maravich was 6'4" in high school and was getting ready to play in college when his father took a coaching position at Louisiana State University. Now, at that time, and I think I've mentioned this with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and some of these other guys, NCAA rules prohibited first-year students from playing at varsity level, which forced Maravich to play on the freshman team. In his first game, Maravich put up 50 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists against Southeastern Louisiana College. In only 3 years playing on the varsity team and under his father's coaching at LSU, Maravich scored 3,667 points, 1,138 of them during 67-68, 1,148 in 68-69, and 1,381 in 69-70, while averaging 43.8, 44.2, and 44.5 points per game. For his collegiate career, the 6'5" Maravich averaged 44.2 points per game in just 83 contests and led the NCAA in scoring for each of his 3 years. What makes his scoring so spectacular and impressive is that he was doing this without the three-point line. And, some coach went back and looked at Maravich's games and made an estimation of how many points he would have averaged. Matter of fact, here it is. It has been reported that former LSU coach Dale Brown charted every shot Maravich scored and concluded that if his shots from three-point range had been counted as 3 points, Maravich average would have totaled 57 points per game and 12 three-pointers per game. 12. Another thing that made his scoring so phenomenal is the shot clock had also not yet been instituted in NCAA play during Maravich's college career. A time limit on ball possessions speeds up play, mandates an additional number of field goal attempts, eliminates stalling, and decreases the number of possessions throughout the game, all resulting in higher overall scoring. So, if he was playing college today, doing the same type of thing, he probably would have been averaging 60-plus points a game in college. This is why he was such an extraordinary collegiate legend. Arguably, from an individual standpoint, he's the greatest collegiate player we ever received. All around, when you round it out to winning and dominance, is Kareem. But when it comes to individual performance and dominance, it's Pete Maravich. Now, Pete Maravich was selected by the Atlanta Hawks, the third pick in the first round of 1970 draft, where he played for coach Richie Guerin. Richie Guerin, of course, was a former high-scoring guard for the New York Knicks in the 1950s and 1960s. Still alive today, Richie Guerin. I think he's like 87, 88 years old. He was not a natural fit in Atlanta, as the Hawks already boasted a top-notch scorer at the guard position in Lou Hudson. In fact, Maravich's flamboyant style stood in stark contrast to the conservative play of Hudson and star center Walt Bellamy. I think I've mentioned that before. It also did not help that many of the veteran players resented the $1.9 million contract that Maravich received from the team, a very large salary in those days. Maravich appeared in 81 games and averaged 23.2 points per contest, good enough to earn NBA All-Rookie Team honors. But the team only went 36-46, less than the year before. But the Hawks qualified for the playoffs, where they lost to the New York Knicks in the first round, with Maravich averaging 22 points a contest in that 5-game series. Maravich struggled during his second year by his standards. His scoring average dipped to 19.3 points per game, and the Hawks finished with another disappointing 36-46 record. Once again, they qualified for the playoffs, and once again, they were eliminated in the first round. However, Atlanta fought hard against the Celtics, with Maravich averaging 27.7 points per game. During his third season, Maravich would average 26.1 points per game, which was fifth in the league at the time, and he dished out nearly 7 assists per game. The Hawks finished 46-36 that year. but once again lost in the first round of the playoffs. The next year was his best yet individually. Maravich averaged 27.7 points per game, second in the league behind Bob McAdoo, and earned his second appearance in the All-Star game. However, the Atlanta Hawks went 35-47 and missed the postseason completely. After that season, the New Orleans Jazz became an expansion franchise. And being that Pete Maravich had notoriety, or not notoriety, but celebrity in New Orleans, the Jazz acquired Maravich in a trade. Maravich averaged 21.5 points per game during the 74-75 season, his first year with the Jazz, but he shot a career-worst 41.9% from the floor, and the Jazz only went 23-59 that year. The next year, 1975-76, Maravich struggled with injuries and played just 62 games, but he averaged 25.9 points per game during that year. And while individually he thrilled crowds with his, with his flashy style, no-look passes, he was a one-man show, but they weren't winning. They went 35-47 and failed to make the playoffs. Although individually, Maravich earned his third All-Star game appearance and was honored on the All-NBA first team. 1976-77 was his best individual season. Maravich led the league in scoring, averaging 31.1 points per game. He scored 40 or more points 13 times, 50 or more in 4 games, including a 68-point explosion against the New York Knicks, where he buried 26 of 43 shots from the floor. What was so impressive about this game, and you could probably see some of it on YouTube, is that Maravich fouled out with something around 4 minutes to go in the game. I think it was an offensive foul. Back then, superstars weren't getting all those gimmicky calls they do today. Also, there was no three-point shot. So if there was a three-point shot, Maravich probably would have had something around 74, 75 points. And if he was able to play all the way to the end of the game, he could have cracked 80-something points. That's how hot Pete Maravich was in this particular game. But once again, his team only finished 35-47. During the 77-78 season, Maravich missed 32 games, and injuries was beginning to take a toll on him, and he was losing some of his quickness and athleticism. But he still managed to average 27 points and 6.7 assists. But the Jazz only finished 39-43 and did not make the playoffs. The next year, Maravich played in just 49 games. His last full season with the Jazz, he scored 22.6 points per game, but they did not make the playoffs. In his last year, the New Orleans Jazz moved to Utah, where they became the Utah Jazz. And Maravich was ultimately having issues with the new head coach. And him and the new head coach were butting heads. Maravich was being benched more and more. And ultimately, because of that, plus his declining play, Maravich was placed on waivers in January '80, and he signed with the Celtics. But he did not mesh very well with the team. I think Larry Bird used to really riddle him, really get on him and goad him about his poor play. He was just not a good fit for the Celtics, who were a team-orientated ball club, and Maravich was a very flamboyant player, but he just didn't mesh well. And after the season, Pete Maravich retired. Unfortunately, Pete Maravich struggled in life personally, depression, and Pete tried to find happiness in his life. Ultimately, he became a born-again Christian, as did his father, and that seemed to bring him peace and tranquility. In 1987, Pete Maravich was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And 1987 was a sad year for Pete. That was the year that his father, Press, died of cancer. Reportedly, the last thing that he told his father was, "I'll see you soon." I think Pete didn't realize how soon it would be. January 1988, while playing a pickup game, I believe it was at a church where they had a basketball center. Pete Maravich collapsed and died. He was only 40 years old. It was determined and discovered that Pete only had one, I believe it was one ventricle. I think people are usually born with two. He had one. So all those years he was playing basketball, his heart was compensating with just one. But Pete Maravich, was only 40 years old. The legend lives on. During the 50th anniversary team back in 1997 when they were inducted, at the time Pete Maravich was the only legend to be deceased. All 49, he was the only one to be deceased. All 49 others were still alive at the time. But since then, we've lost a lot of basketball legends. But just want to do a tribute to Pete Maravich, one of the great players in the history of the NBA, one of the great revolutionary players. A lot of the moves that you see players do today, while of course they've made improvements on it, a lot of these moves were revolutionized and created from Pete Maravich. Just guys have copied Pete and have made tweaks. There's this idiot on YouTube, man, that loves to look at footage from the 70s, right? And he likes to sit in his roach-infested apartment and critique players from the past. This loser. You could just tell he's a loser. You could smell the roach infestation from his videos. Doesn't he realize that the players of today were able to steal moves from others and just add to it? But see, a Nimrod Nimkapoop like him doesn't recognize that. Because his IQ is so low. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's all I got to say in this one. Tell me what you guys think.